When you hear the word leukemia or cancer, you think the worst straight away. You just wonder, how long have I got? You always think that this is going to be the end. As far as the family goes, everyone's been fantastic. They never showed any signs that it was getting them down. It just showed to me that they're the number one people in your life.
Well, it was a shock, and although I was worried about him, I was thinking about how the kid's going to grow up without a father if the worst happens. What was I going to do? Because he's the breadwinner and he's always been the problem solver.
I'd been to the doctor a couple of times, and with my line of work, physical stuff and that, you just assume, you've strained something, and this had lingered on for a couple of weeks and hadn't got better, and the doctor got to the stage, he said, well, I don't know, we'll do some blood tests and see what happens. All of a sudden he brings out the word leukemia.
I came home from school when I was 12, and all I knew was that Dad had gone to the doctors, and then it finally came out, and me and my sisters took it pretty tough. And you're wondering if your dad's going to die in the next week.
I went back to the oncologist for another checkup, and all of a sudden he said, I think it's time for chemotherapy.
With the treatment for the first week or so, it wasn't so bad. But then when all the drugs started kicking in that they were giving him and that, it went downhill pretty quick. I
think my last lot of chemotherapy was New Year's Eve, 2010. The oncologist said to me that I will need a bone marrow transplant. There is a 70% success rate with it. I said, okay, well, it was either that or I'd be dead by the time I was 55. The specialist, he was confident he could get me through it. So I didn't sort of dwell on the negatives. I just looked at all the positives out of it, and so far, so good. As far as insurance goes, being self-employed, I always thought I needed something to fall back on.
Coming here the first time, I think Jason was only a little boy. Back then, trauma insurance wasn't sold a hell of a lot in 1996.
If we hadn't have received that money, we most probably would have had to sell the house.
I've been through a hell of a lot with this illness, and the last thing you want to be worrying about is how you're going to financially survive.
Dale did everything. He came around late one night with all the papers and got Don to sign them. The next day or two, he was passing Don the cheques.
It is my dream to give cheques up every day of the week. You walk away giving someone the opportunity to get better, make life a little bit easier whilst he's going through that terrible time.
And I probably always thought, look, I'm big and strong and I'll be fine, nothing's going to happen to me. But you don't know what's around the corner.
I really did never think that I'd be a candidate for open heart surgery at such a young age. It's really not something that I expected. I have 3 children. My oldest Emily is 16, Jemima is 13 and Hugo is 10.
Daniel is completely the 150% man, so whatever the child is interested in at the time, he sort of adopts their interest.
If they went to little athletics, I'd go and run as well, or if they were playing soccer, I'd train one of the teams. So for them it's quite daunting to see someone who's been fit and healthy being in hospital and not being able to really do anything for themselves.
The day that Daniel had been diagnosed, he was going for his insurance medical.
That evening the cardiologist rang me up and said I needed to come back in and see him. He diagnosed that I had a problem called cardiomyopathy. It thickens the left ventricle and the walls of your heart, and it also cuts out the amount of blood that can be pumped by the heart.
I've always been very direct with the children. I tried to give them the information as best as I could. Basically I said, Dad, he's not going to be able to do as much as he used to. He has a serious heart condition. We need to really look after Dad. It was like a bomb had gone off in my head. I really needed to start thinking about my position as the main income earner in the family.
The traditional course of medication is to be put on beta blockers, which basically slow your heart rate right down, but I had a nasty reaction that made me very tired. The first diagnosis was in April, and by October that year I was in hospital. I had a situation where I went into atrial fibrillation and I collapsed, and that's where I sort of first came under the cardiac team at St Vincent's.
Unfortunately, in February, he went downhill very, very quickly. They identified that he needed the open heart surgery.
At the moment, I'm still in the recovery stage of having my chest cut open. It won't be until I get over the surgery that I can really see if there's been any long-term benefit. Once I was diagnosed with the problem, my advisor was very proactive in relation to how the claim would proceed. And once the insurer knew that that was going to occur, they'd already started processing the claim immediately. I think the claim was paid within a week of that occurring.
The day we were actually leaving to go to Sydney for the Daniel surgery was the day we got the call that they were going to approve the claim, and I have to say I did cry because the relief that went with it was unbelievable. 4 days after Daniel had the surgery, the money was in the account, and I was gobsmacked. When I came back from the hospital and I was able to write those cheques and just go, wow, I don't have to worry about this. You know, this is okay, we can move on and have quite a functioning life.
Nobody expects to have a serious illness, but to have trauma cover where if there's a specified illness and you're paid a lump sum, for me it was a great relief.
My name's Leanne, I'm 48 years old. I have 2 children. I have a daughter, Carly, who's 20. She's the artist in the family. My son, Cale, is 18. He's hoping to study politics at university and one day wants to be Prime Minister. My husband's name's Tony. He's a mechanical engineer. He works a lot, but together we like to take holidays, doing things as a family, eating out, going to the beach, picnics, that sort of thing. We took out our insurance policy in 1997. We had a young family and we had a mortgage. My thoughts on life insurance at the time were, hopefully it was something that you would never need, but it was probably a nice thing to have just for peace of mind. Mainly, I think, because of the family. Our financial advisor helped us decide what type of cover we needed by looking at what we would need to do if something happened to one of us. He was very helpful in explaining things to us and suggesting things to us that we hadn't thought of.
The starting point is just to, be open and explain their situation, their family situation, their business situation, put strategies in place to protect what's important to them.
We considered cancelling our cover actually not long before I became ill. Things were a bit tight and it was somewhere where we could cut the budget because you think that you won't need it. We chose to keep the cover because you never really know what's going to happen, and knowing our luck, something would happen when we least expected it. And it did. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. It's quite rare, it's less than 1% of all blood cancers. I think we spent most of that day just crying on and off and trying to get our heads around the idea. When I was diagnosed, we actually didn't think about our policy. Then, because we were struggling financially, we suddenly remembered that, hang on, we've got this policy.
When Tony first contacted me, I made an appointment and went over and met Tony and Leanne at their house. Just make sure we get as much information to alleviate the pressure. I know when it came time to actually hand the cheque over, Tony was keen to get to the bank just to pay the mortgage off.
They were very helpful. They sent me some forms, we filled them out. I had to get some documentation from my specialist, and we sent it back, and the claim was paid very, very quickly. When I received the payment, I felt very relieved. It was one part of my life that I didn't have to worry about. It took the focus away from being sick again. It gave me something good and positive.
It was just wonderful to be in a position to help with these clients, and you know, of all the years that I've been doing this, just to have had that opportunity to be there and get the result we did, yeah, it was excellent.
The diagnosis changed my lifestyle in that it took away my freedom, I guess. If I hadn't have had the policy when I was diagnosed, our life would have been a lot different. It would have been a lot more stressful. I mean, it was a devastating discovery anyway. And then if we had that on top of financial worries as well, it just would have made life so much harder and put a lot more stress on the whole family, I think. If someone was in two minds about taking out life insurance, I would strongly encourage them to do it. Nobody ever thinks that they're going to need it, but sometimes unexpected things happen, and it's just nice to know that when it does, that there's that security there and peace of mind of having the life insurance.
I'm a 60-year-old. I've got two great sons. I have a wonderful partner and a magnificent stepdaughter. My professional career goes back to my university days. I already had a commerce degree, so I then went and retrained as a lawyer. I was the lawyer that a small business loved to have but never could find. I've always set very high standards in whatever I wanted to do, and I'll never die regretting if only I'd have done that. It's a lovely ride when you do that. A bit bumpy, but it's good fun. The thing that started first is sleep apnea, and I put that down as the primary cause of every other health problem that I've had, including depression, including the melanomas and the heart disease. The constant build-up of pressure eventually led to severe depression and a complete breakdown. Depression is something that's not like a broken leg. Depression will build up over time, and by the time it's recognised that you have it, you're already in a very severe state. During the period of treatment, a chiropractor said to me, "I don't like the look of that mole on your back. I suggest you get it checked." I got a referral to a dermatologist. He said, "I don't like it, we'll cut it out." He sat me down and he said, "Well, Martin, I'm glad to say that we got it. It's malignant, but we've contained it within the skin layer. You'll make a full recovery. Oh, by the way, do you have trauma insurance?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, that'll claim." And within a week I had my cheque. And I then looked at it and I remembered you only get paid out on a trauma policy on the basis that but for the surgeon's skill you would have died. And from my point of view, I realised I'd dodged a bullet. I just sat there and cried. And from a depression point of view, that tipped me over the edge. And that's when I made the decision to quit work. I wanted to get myself whole and well before I did anything else. And in 2010, I had another melanoma. This time it was a metastatic melanoma, and I suffered another breakdown. So it was after that that I then decided it was time to look after me, number one, and give up the dream of continuing to work. I then made a claim on my total and permanent disability policy, and that brings me to where I am today. I'm no longer able to work as an elite lawyer. I'm on income protection. I've received my total and permanent disability payout, and it's now looking to the future. I took my first insurance policy out in 1994. I took the view that if I was advising clients for the need, I've got to practice what I preach. I believe that having the adequate insurance for me has allowed me to plan the rest of my life with a degree of certainty, knowing that I can enjoy it.
When you think about what the possibilities of what might happen, you know, if I hadn't have survived my heart attack, the impact to the family would just be, besides, you know, the death of the dad, the financial burden of having to move out and all the emotional trauma that goes along with that as well. You wouldn't know what their future would be. Having the correct insurance in place, you at least know that the future that you're currently planning for them can still take place. I was out training for, do a bit of running and cycling. I was training for the Gold Coast Half Marathon, and I was out at lunchtime at work doing a run, and I got a bit of chest pain. I just thought it was a bit of indigestion. But over the next couple of weeks, just walking to the train station and back again, the chest pain was just getting worse. I went to see my doctor, and she referred me immediately to a cardiologist. And then that afternoon I was checked into hospital.
The day that he was admitted into hospital, the nurses were laughing at him because he walked in with Otto on his hip. And like most people get stretchered into here or in a wheelchair. And
they did an angiogram, which is a wire up the femoral artery to check out how your heart is. They discovered a 100% blockage in one artery and a 80 to 90% blockage in another artery.
One minute he was in a bed and the next minute I was standing in this empty space with Otto on my hip and just like, oh, he's gone. I thought, I'll just go and follow him. So I followed him out to the main corridor of the hospital and sort of feeling like a bit of a ninny, but just calling out to him, you know, I love you, and, you know, watching him disappear. And I had this hour of, what am I going to do and who am I going to call?
It was really, really quite a surprise, you know, because I was quite a fit person. I look after myself, I eat well, I don't smoke, I don't drink excessively. It took a while for it to actually sink in. I think it was, you know, I woke up at 2 a.m. the night that I was in hospital and, you know, just I think broke down. The nurses were wonderful, but you know, it's just you know, thinking about your family and, you know, the possibility of not seeing your kids grow up and all of those kind of things. It's really sort of hits home. It's you know, it's yeah, not much fun. My financial advisor is David Baccinelli. I've had David as a financial advisor for about 5 years. One of the first things you think of is, you know, how we're going to pay the mortgage and, you know, pay the visa bills and all those kind of things that are coming in the doors.
I hadn't even thought about trauma insurance, but Simon's, I think men think differently and he was thinking really practically.
We rang Dave to see if we were covered for our insurance for this kind of thing, so, and we were, which is good. So, you know, at least it takes that pressure off. I'm a contractor, so I don't get paid if I don't work. If we didn't have the insurance, we probably would have had to have remortgaged the house, I think. David helped us submit our application. He came over to our house and helped us fill out the forms. He also told us all the information that we needed to gather to submit the application. I mean, I was lucky I survived my heart attack. If I had have died, you know, it'd be terrible. I'd be leaving my wife and kids behind, but at least I'd know that they would have been looked after financially.
We didn't know whether we'd get anything, we didn't know how much we'd get, and what we got was fantastic.
I didn't ever think I'd actually have to use it. But you know, it's great that it's in place. You know, it's like wearing a seatbelt. You know, you don't think that you're ever really going to have a car accident, but you don't drive around without a seatbelt on. So, if you're married and you've got kids and you've got financial commitments, having the appropriate insurance in place is absolutely paramount.
My name's Leanne, I'm 48 years old.
I live in Scone in the Hunter Valley and I'm a lawyer.
I've got a beautiful wife, Joanne.
And I think I've been married about 28 years now.
I've got 2 great sons.
Twin girls, Tara and Jessica.
My oldest Emily is 16.
My son Kale is 18.
Hugo, who's 7, Isabel, who's 5, and Otto, who's 2.
I like photography.
Going to the pub for dinner.
Loved sport all my life.
Do a bit of running and cycling.
The kids love you to participate. They love to see you doing something that they're doing.
Been to the doctor a couple of times. I just had some pain in my side and that.
That evening, the cardiologist rang me up and said I needed to come back in and see him.
They discovered a 100% blockage in one artery.
He sat me down and he said, well, Martin, I'm glad to say that we got it. It's malignant.
And a 80 to 90% blockage in another artery.
And he said, well, I'm sorry, Had, that's the only way I can break it to you, it's leukemia.
It's quite rare, it's less than 1% of all blood cancers.
I'm only 39.
The worst case scenario is that I'd be put on a transplant list.
I was told that I had 3 to 5 years basically to live.
My family and close friends had expected that I wouldn't survive.
It was quite devastating to find out that you've got a heart problem.
I think we spent most of that day just crying on and off and trying to get our heads around the idea.
They're in shock and thinking, oh, I'm going to lose Dad, or I'm going to lose my husband, and I'm going to lose my son.
At the time, we really weren't sure how it would progress.
I was really worried about the family as to how they were going to get by.
Just thinking how that would affect my kids, you know, having to lose a dad early.
I was quite optimistic that I'd just be able to continue in my lifestyle and doing what I'd always done.
And so far, so good.
I took my first insurance policy out in 1994.
We had a young family and we had a mortgage.
I always thought I needed something.
It's like wearing a seatbelt.
I certainly looked at the insurance premiums as being a good investment into the future in case something went wrong.
Having a claim paid made a huge difference to me.
And to think all the years that I've paid into this policy, it's actually, you know, been worthwhile.
It took the focus away from being sick again.
I've been through a hell of a lot with this illness, and the last thing you want to be worrying about as well is how you're going to financially survive.
At least it takes that pressure off.
People need to plan for the future.
If someone was in two minds about taking out life insurance, I would strongly encourage them to do it.
Nobody expects to have a serious illness.
Why wouldn't I recommend that people look after themselves?
To have the confidence to know that you're going to get this payout that's going to help your family out, well, it's just a godsend.